This is an ABC News special report.
What has become of me could happen only in America. Like so many others, I owe so much to the entry this nation afforded to people yearning to breathe free. Serving on this court is the highest honor, the most awesome trust that can be placed in a judge. It means working at my craft, working with and for the law as a way to keep our society both ordered and free.
Celebrating Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a judicial icon. Now reporting, Chief Anchor George Stephanopoulos.
Good morning and welcome to our coverage of the celebration of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. That is the scene at the Supreme Court this morning. You see the plaza and the Supreme Court steps lined by as honorary pallbearers who all served as clerks to Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Her family and friends are also gathered there at the Supreme Court today as we prepare to see her casket roll up to the Supreme Court, where she will lie in repose for the next 2 days. An honor accorded to justices going back to Salmon Chase back in the 1800s. Terry Moran, we're seeing the pallbearers walk down the stairs right now. Huge crowd across the street as well. And ever since the word broke on Friday night that Justice Ginsburg had passed, you've seen people come to pay their respects.
George, it's been remarkable and beautiful and solemn and really, in a way, a hero's tribute, the kind of thing that we have seen for the great statesmen and soldiers of our time. Ruth Bader Ginsburg touched so many people, and to see the memorial here grow over the past several days as people brought flowers and candles, wrote cards and signs, and then the sidewalk and the plaza, this vast plaza, not up on the steps but here on the sidewalk, covered in chalk messages in Hebrew, in English, from all over the world. And so many children, I brought my own kids here, coming because they're learning about what Ruth Bader Ginsburg has done for this country, for equality, the principle of equality in their schools. There was sadness, but there was also a great deal of pride. Concern among those who are of the liberal persuasion, and they're very concerned about who will replace Justice Ginsburg, but it wasn't a place for politics. It was a place for gratitude more than anything else. And here in this solemn moment, you can feel that as well.
And you can see now the hearse approaching the steps of the Supreme Court. The casket will be taken up the steps, gone to the Great Hall of the Supreme Court. It will be a very short, solemn, private ceremony. Chief Justice John Roberts expected to speak. Also, Rabbi Lauren Holtzblatt, who's a rabbi at the Adas Israel Congregation in Washington, D.C. Her husband served as a law clerk to Justice Ginsburg. Kate Shaw, you served as a clerk on the Supreme Court, and I remember what Justice Souter said about his colleague, Justice Ginsburg. She achieved greatness before she became a great justice.
That's right. So we're reflecting on her legacy, not just as a justice, but a giant in the law decades before she ever ascended to the bench. So in the 1970s, she litigated cases that really changed the meaning of the Constitution. Before she started litigating these cases, it wasn't clear that the Constitution's equality guarantees applied to women at all. And she systematically changed that understanding by convincing the 9 men on the Supreme Court to basically include women in the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. And then years later, she ends up on the DC Circuit, and then for nearly 30 years on the Supreme Court, continuing to place her mark on the law. But it's, her life in its entirety, both as a lawyer and as a justice, and then more recently, really as an American icon that I think everyone is, coming together to honor today.
And Kate, we're seeing her pallbearers now approach the casket. When President Clinton appointed her back in 1993, one of her great selling points was that she was someone he believed could work with the Republicans, with the conservatives on the court, and she did that. But she also became known later in her career for those fierce dissents.
She somehow managed to do both, right? To sort of forge these cross-ideological alliances. Her friendship with Justice Scalia was as real and deep as any friendship that you will encounter. I mean, I've talked to countless Scalia clerks in the last few days who who are devastated by this, because Justice Ginsburg meant a great deal to them just because of her relationship with Justice Scalia. So that was real, and yet they disagreed also as fiercely as you can imagine. And so her dissents, I think they were respectful, but they were powerful, and in many ways that's what sort of catapulted her into the public view in the last decade or so, her fierce dissents, but always on the substance, always on the merit, and always in a way that allowed her to retain, good, warm even relationships with her fiercest adversaries.
Casket now being taken up the steps of the Supreme Court. All 8 justices of the Supreme Court will be there today to honor their colleague. John Carl, first time all 8 justices together since this pandemic struck.
Yeah, it's been a strange time for all of us, a strange time for the Supreme Court, working virtually. I have to say, one thing that strikes me about my memories of Ruth Bader Ginsburg was attending hearings at the Supreme Court, which I've had a chance to do from time to time. Her questioning, she was often the first to jump in, had absolutely no patience for long preambles by counsel for either side of a case. She would jump right in, interrupt, sometimes in the first sentence or two of a lawyer, making the case. She had read all the material she knew was at stake. She wanted to get right to the meat of the matter.
In her honor today, the chair of the justice is draped in black wool crepe, as is the bench in front of it. Those are Supreme Court police actually carrying the casket. Her clerks lining the way, all in masks in this time of COVID. As the casket makes it up the steps, it will be placed on the Lincoln catafalque, another American tradition. Of course, we saw that earlier this summer when Congressman John Lewis, the great civil rights hero, lay in state at the U.S. Capitol. Justice Ginsburg served on the court for 27 years. As I said, appointed by Bill Clinton back in 1993. Terry Moran, you see all those clerks lining the steps. What a relationship between a justice and their clerks.
Well, Kate can speak to this. It's so special. Those of us who've covered the court sometimes are almost jealous. It's part hard work, it's part a seminar, it's part a personal relationship that for so many of them helps define their lives. And Ruth Ginsburg, like the other justices, an exacting taskmaster. Speaking to former clerks, you had to know the brief just as well as she did, and she was tough but always a very kind person. She managed to combine in all of her life, really, grace and steel. I'm remembered of a time, more than a decade ago, that she came to the court after battling cancer, which she did for 20 years. She showed up in the press room, which the justices don't often do. There was an awkward greeting. Somebody asked, "How are you feeling, Justice Ginsburg?" And she paused. She's a woman who deployed silences to great effect. She gathered the moment to her, and then she said in that quiet voice, very determined, "I'm not going anywhere." We laughed, she didn't.
Cecilia Vega, she hung on all through this year despite battling cancer, not once, but at least twice.
She did, and it was a fight, and there were many nervous times over the course of that. And there are now some Democrats in the wake of her passing who have been asking, in retrospect, whether with her illnesses that she faced over the course of these years, she perhaps should have stepped down sooner, given where we are with the politics in our country right now and the battle that is about to be waged on Capitol Hill for her replacement. But as anybody who has covered this justice, as anybody who has met and spoke with her or listened to her interviews knows, no one was going to tell Ruth Bader Ginsburg what to do when it came to her job, when she should do it, or how long she should stay in that seat. And certainly that is exactly what she did. She stayed until the very end. What an example she set. As you see the casket placed on the Lincoln catafalque, the justices behind her. Chief Justice John Roberts will speak. Family of Justice Ginsburg there as well. She was a widow. Her husband, Martin Ginsburg, also a lawyer. They met before law school. Deb Roberts, what a love story.
What a love story indeed, George. I have to say, in spite of her towering intellect and her trailblazing spirit, so many admired her for this storybook of a marriage, 56 years to her beloved Marty, whom she met as an undergrad. And they had a real partnership at a time when that wasn't very common. He just adored her. Said she was a terrible cook, so he learned to become a cook. And he advocated for her to be on the court. He called her the love of his life. She said he was the first man who cared that she had a brain. A real love story. I think the kind of thing that seminars should be taught about. What a couple and what a marriage.
You see Justice Stephen Breyer there, also appointed by Bill Clinton, Chief Justice John Roberts, President George W. Bush, Elena Kagan, Neil Gorsuch, Clarence Thomas as well. Judge Alito, Justice Alito. Her family now paying their respects. Her daughter Jane Ginsburg, her son James, and their families.
You may be seated.
This is Rabbi Lauren Holtzblatt, who will lead the ceremony. Half the Ginsburg family seated so far. Notice the woman in the red kerchief there in that front row is the granddaughter of Justice Ginsburg, Clara Spira. It was to her who Justice Ginsburg dictated her final wish, her fervent wish to the public, that she be replaced by the president elected on November 3rd. I believe that is Justice Sotomayor wearing the full face shield there. Very small ceremony. There'll be a larger memorial in the Capitol on Friday morning, where Justice Ginsburg will lie in state. The first woman in United States history to actually lie in state in the U.S. Capitol, Rosa Parks, was given the honor of lying in repose. Justice Ginsburg will be the first woman to officially lie in state.
You may be seated. Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. Blessed is God, the true judge. Adonai Natan v'Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach. God has given, God has taken. Praise be the name of Adonai. Psalm 23. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, binodeh sheyar bitzeni. Amei menuchot yanahaleini, nafshi yishovev yancheni v'maglei tzedek leman shemo. גם כי אלך בקץ המוות לא ירא, כי אתה עמדי, שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צוררי, דשנת בשמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. A Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures. God leads me beside the still waters. God restores my soul. God guides me in the straight paths for God's name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai forever. Today we stand in mourning of an American hero, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. In a moment, I will speak to what she meant to all of us, but first, I would like to turn to her beloved family. The Justice was a mother, a grandmother, and as we all know, had one of the most extraordinary life partners in her beloved Marty. To each of you, to the Justice's colleagues, to her law clerks, and to her court family, the country mourns with you and sends you our deepest love and comfort. To be born into a world that does not see you, that does not believe in your potential, that does not give you a path for opportunity or a clear path for education, and despite this, to be able to see beyond the world you are in, to imagine that something can be different. That is the job of a prophet. And it is the rare prophet who not only imagines a new world, but also makes that new world a reality in her lifetime. This was the brilliance and vision of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The Torah is relentless in reminding, in instructing, in commanding that we never forget those who live in the shadows, those whose freedom and opportunity are not guaranteed. 36 times we are taught that we must never forget the stranger. 12 times we are told to care for the widow and the orphan. This is one of the most important commandments of the Torah. It is the Torah's call to action. And it is also the promise written into our Constitution. As Justice Ginsburg said, and I quote, "Think back to 1787. Who were we the people? They certainly weren't women. They surely weren't people held in human bondage. The genius of our Constitution is that now, over more than 200, sometimes turbulent years, that we has expanded and expanded. This was Justice Ginsburg's life's work, to insist that the Constitution deliver on its promise, that we, the people, would include all the people. She carried out that work in every chapter of her life. As an advocate arguing 6 times before this court for equal treatment for women and men, as a judge on the DC circuit, and as a justice on this court, and as a path-marking role model to women and girls of all ages, who now know that no office is out of reach for their dreams, whether that is to serve in the highest court of our land or closer to home for me as the rabbi of their community. Nothing could stop Justice Ginsburg's unflagging devotion to this project, not even cancer. Justice Ginsburg, Midor Lador, from generation to generation, we promise to carry forward your legacy. May you rest under the wings of the Shekhinah, knowing that you have tirelessly served us and this great country, the United States of America. Please rise. El Malei Rachamim Shochein B'Maromim Hametzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina B'malot Kedoshim U'Teharim Kezohar Harakia Mazhirim Et Nishmat Yitarucha Batzir Leia Sheolcha Leolama Began Hayden Tehei Menuchata Ana Baal HaRachamim Astireha B'Seter Knafecha Leolamim Utzror Bitzror HaChayim Nishmata Adonai Hu Nachalata V'tanuach B'Shalom Amishkeva V'nomar Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure to the soul of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi Holtzblatt, for those compelling words. Jane, Jim, the entire Ginsburg family, on behalf of all the justices, the spouses of the justices, and the entire Supreme Court family, I offer our heartfelt condolences on the loss of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. That loss is widely shared, but we know that it falls most heavily on the family. Justice Ginsburg's life was one of the many versions of the American dream. Her father was an immigrant from Odessa. Her mother was born 4 months after her family arrived from Poland. Her mother later worked as a bookkeeper in Brooklyn. Ruth used to ask, what is the difference between a bookkeeper in Brooklyn and a Supreme Court justice? Her answer, 1 generation. It has been said that Ruth wanted to be an opera virtuoso, but became a rock star instead. But she chose the law. Subjected to discrimination in law school and the job market because she was a woman, Ruth would grow to become the leading advocate fighting such discrimination in court. She was not an opera star, but she found her stage right behind me in our courtroom. There she won famous victories that helped move our nation closer to equal justice under law, to the extent that women are now a majority in law schools, not simply a handful. Later, she became a star on the bench, where she sat for 27 years. Her 483 majority, concurring, and dissenting opinions will steer the court for decades. They are written with the unaffected grace of precision. Her voice in court and in our conference room was soft, but when she spoke, people listened. Among the words that best describe Ruth, tough, brave, a fighter, a winner, but also thoughtful, careful, compassionate, honest. When it came to opera, insightful, passionate. When it came to sports, clueless. Justice Ginsburg had many virtues of her own, but she also unavoidably promoted one particular one, humility in others. For example, On more than a few occasions, someone would approach or call me and describe some upcoming occasion or event that was important to them, and I knew what was coming. Could I come and speak? But no, instead, could I pass along an invitation to Justice Ginsburg and put in a good word? Many of you have seen the famous picture of Justice Scalia and Justice Ginsburg riding atop an elephant in India. It captured so much of Ruth. There she was, doing something totally unexpected, just as she had in law school, where she was not only one of the few women, but a new mother to boot. And in the photograph, she is riding with a dear friend, a friend with totally divergent views. There is no indication in the photo that either was poised to push the other off. For many years, of course, Ruth battled serious illness. She met each of those challenges with a combination of candid assessment and fierce determination. In doing so, she encouraged others who have their own battles with illness, including employees here in the court. And she emerged victorious, time and again, against all odds. But finally, the odds won out, and now Ruth has left us. I mentioned at the outset that Ruth's passing weighed most heavily on her family, and that is true. But the court was her family too. This building was her home too. Of course, she will live on in what she did to improve the law and the lives of all of us. And yet, still, Ruth is gone, and we grieve. Let us have a moment of silence for reflection. May she rest in peace.
And that concludes the memorial ceremony for Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. You see the Supreme Court justices and their families now leaving. Justice Ginsburg's family will follow behind. Kate Shaw, we heard that tribute from the Chief Justice there, a tribute to Ruth Bader Ginsburg's career, to Ruth Bader Ginsburg as a person, warm, intimate words. He reminded everyone that the court was her family too, and it's a reminder to all of us just how different from our other institutions the Supreme Court is.
And it's a poignant message right now when the Supreme Court is at the center of the discourse. But, you know, I think that the Chief Justice sort of channeled something that Ginsburg has famously said years ago in an interview, which is, you know, how would you like to be remembered? She said, I would like to be remembered as someone who used what talent she had to make the world a little bit better. And she did, you know, more than just make the world a little bit better, but she was, as the Chief Justice said, a humble person. But, you know, to the extent that we're all thinking about what you know, sort of to do in the wake of the loss of Justice Ginsburg, you know, making the world a little bit better, improving the institutions around us, improving our politics, like those are really powerful legacies. And, you know, if there's a message in what the Chief Justice said, maybe that is that message.
We see the flag flying at half-staff there outside the Supreme Court, just across the United States Capitol. Our senior congressional correspondent, Mary Bruce, is there. Mary, on Friday, Justice Ginsburg will be remembered at the Capitol, and then another huge fight begins.
And George, the split screen that we have seen this week has just been remarkable. While the nation comes together to mourn the loss of this truly incredible life, here across the street at the Capitol, we are in the midst of this bitterly partisan fight. I think for Ruth Bader Ginsburg supporters and admirers on the left, especially many women across this country, it has been a week full of anguish and also outrage at this fight to fill her seat. And this fight has moved very quickly. It is remarkable. Less than a week after her passing, it seems all but certain that Republicans here will have the votes to fill this seat, despite taking an opposite position in 2016 during the fight to fill Antonin Scalia's seat in the run-up to that election. Republican leaders here making clear, given the balance of power, they feel this is a very different situation. We could be heading towards hearings here in early October. President Trump making it clear he wants this seat filled before Election Day. Democrats here effectively powerless to stop this.
Mary Bruce, thanks very much. But today, the focus on Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. As Chief Justice Roberts said, her life one of many versions of the American dream, her career dedicated to bringing us closer to equal opportunity for all.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.